Hey, and welcome to the Neurodivergent Musician Podcast, where I explore the world of neurodiversity and musicianship. I'm your host, John Hart, and today's episode is where I featured on another podcast called the Neurodiversity Voices Podcast. I explored my metamorphosis, my journey, and my purpose going forward with neurodivergent musicians. There's only half the episode here, but once you've finished it, go on over to the Neurodiversity Voices podcast website. There will be a link in the description and you can hear the rest of the episode. Let's get into it.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Neurodiversity Voices podcast. I'm Paul, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Tegan Sigansky.
Hi everyone, it's great to be here.
And John. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciated our pre-conversation, and we're excited to share more of your story with our listeners and viewers.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us again after our pre-conversation. We're really glad to have you back and get to talk with you more.
Brilliant. Yeah, loved it. Thank you.
John, to get us started, and for people who are just meeting you for the first time, can you tell us a bit about who you are and what your journey looks like today?
I'm John. I'm 42. I grew up in the south of England on an island called the Isle of Wight, and then moved off. It's kind of like the Shire from the Lord of the Rings, actually. Kind of moved off and then moved towards London Way, which is, if you growing up that way, it's more Mordor way. But anyway, so I started on the piano at like 5, and then I got, picked up a guitar at 8. And then it was probably that from early on. That's all I wanted to be. I just wanted to be a musician when I grow up. And that then from a hobby to a career. And I've been doing that for a couple of decades now. But it wasn't until I crashed the music business in 2017, and then we had the pandemic, so it's compounding. And on the back of the pandemic, I had a mental health crisis. I went into what I call metamorphosis for about 5 years, which we can go into and things. And now I have moved I'm still creating music, so I'm an active musician, but I'm now advocating for neurodivergence, but particularly neurodivergent musicians, because it's kind of, I thought that's what I know best. Yeah, that's where I am at the moment, and I'm a father as well. So.
Amazing. Thank you. One thing that really stood out to us earlier in our conversation was how layered your journey has been. Like, looking back at the things you've done in your journey from your earlier experiences. Already losing my voice. Early experiences that shaped how you understood yourself and your neurodivergence. Like, what kind of things really stand out to you?
In regards to, I suppose, it's obviously everyone's journey into it, or even like a late diagnosis and finding it out. I think I was saying earlier, in 2004 during university when I was studying music, I found out I was dyslexic, but it didn't really affect me. It was just kind of like, but back then it felt like, here's some free stuff, but there wasn't really any information about it. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just use what I can. And then you get an extra, 25 minutes and things. But I didn't really understand me. It just felt like an external thing. And I was in my early 20s, so it's just kind of like you're in a bubble. But I think finding out about the ADHD and autism, especially post-mental health crisis, it was at 38 when you've got, I've got children, I'm running a business, it seems to just come in at a point where the plate is full and it's just about to crack. And from that journey there, for me, it was the entry point to pointing the torch on myself. By pointing the torch on myself, I also went past neurodiversity. I went into introspection and core limited beliefs. I've gone in instead of exploring space, I've gone the opposite way now, which is, it's been a blessing and a curse in a way, because you're just like, oh my word, I've got to point the light in, dark areas and stuff. So it continues. 38 years of not knowing really, and now 3 years into what I called an unofficial degree, and it's continuous. So, and learning from others, like we talked today and stuff. So fascinating.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And that understanding often changes over time. When did things start to shift for you when identity language, or self-acceptance began to fall into place?
So a very interesting thing at the age of 37. So in 2017, I had a wedding music business. It was multi-award winning. It's one of these things. And for someone, I didn't even know I had ADHD and autism then. To succeed in that was just like, wow, okay, I've cracked it here. But then the ego can start to take it and you can become complacent. But by crashing that business, it crashed my self-worth because it was my name at the same time. And then we had the pandemic and stuff. But at 37, again, I've sort of manifested. I want to go into my 40s with clarity and closure. It wasn't, I want more money and things. And, it was kind of, it almost was answered with, yeah, we can do that for you, John, but we're going to have to crash the old version of you first before we do that. And it didn't stop this express freight train going into the ground. And, sort of seeing a crisis and all these other things, obviously people can see it in different ways, and especially family, obviously worrying things. I went through it 4 times over 4 years. And my sort of analogy for that is basically every time I kept going into it, I kept reverting back to my old self. So it's like, we're going to have to crash you harder for you to, get the message here. And throughout that process of, going into crashing, growing to the ground, going through recovery, which is it's unpaid recovery as well. So I'm self-employed and I run my business. But that was particularly the time where I have to give myself permission to rest. And as a father, all these things you're juggling, we don't give ourselves permission. And so by doing that, I studied a few things. I met up with a few coaches and stuff as well. And I think because I was in that kind of open-minded growth mindset space, that I was able to absorb a lot of information and allow my creativity. I gave up alcohol, which was suppressing my emotions, which suppresses my, creativity. And that opened up things. So yeah, there's a multitude of lots, as we talked about in my story and things as well. And I think unlocking my creativity has allowed me to go even deeper. And it's such a personal journey where I will never ever go to someone else and go, well, get rid of that unhealthy coping mechanism, because that might be helping someone survive, during their life. And, I don't wish upon people to go through what I went through. But for me, I'm now starting to see it as it's a blessing. It's an opportunity that a lot of people who go through darkness or mental things sometimes revert back to their old selves. But to push through, I call it mental constipation or mental limbo. It's not the nicest term, but it's one of those where it's that kind of thing. And being able to get through to the other side, there's an awakening of it. And so, yeah, it's fascinating.
It really is. And previously, you also talked to us about how systems played a role in that journey. And what were some of the biggest challenges you faced in the areas of like education, work, or healthcare, or like even as a musician now, like there's different systems that's been in place for a long time. And just kind of once you figure out yourself.
Without doubt, do you know what? There's, especially in the music, obviously all in the arts and creative worlds and stuff, there's a phrase, obviously, with musicians, it'd be like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and that's the kind of phrase that they used to carry on. And, it's one of those where it'd be like they wear it on their sleeves as sort of a badge of honor. And again, I'm not going to go out and, call them out and things as well. But if you now look at it, it's just like, that's unhealthy coping mechanisms right there. And so if you even think of the top musicians who may have made it, Ed Sheeran's and Lewis Capaldi, they brought out documentaries about their mental health and stuff, which means if they've even got to the top and they've got a huge team around them, they're having to survive with alcohol and things to sustain themselves. And throughout this journey, I've learned with systems and things as well, especially neurodivergence. And my quest is kind of like the iceberg effect, where sort of the visual things is what people can see with mental health, whether it's stress and anxiety and depression and addiction and things as well. And it's right to obviously bring awareness about them. But for me, the underbelly is neurodivergence. It's one of those, that's where at the core. And obviously there can be chronic stress and things as well. So it's almost like we can trim the top, but what about at the roots? Where's the nutrients at the things? And this is where the kind of reverse engineering, where I went through that process and I was like, my word, what the hell, what's going on? Because I can't tell people what to do. We can't do that. We can't change people. That's like, I'm not going to go, you stop drinking alcohol. Then no one's going to listen. But if there's an awareness of, look, is this what's making you survive your day? So just point the torch. So I think that awareness first can then point towards the structures, towards the foundations. But the analogy I use is building a house on sand. So your house is external and your sand is internal. It can look great at first. And my family were like, oh, he's got it. But then it starts to shift and self-sabotage starts to kick in. And it's these things that kind of, I may have been taught or may have been shown, which is a very doing thing, but to get it into the kind of core, being without, sort of, it's that kind of, it takes time. None of this is overnight. And I think now by me spreading awareness and talking, unfiltered, sort of unmasked neurodivergent, it's allowing people to go, if he's doing it, I can do it. I can unmask. I can be seen. So I'm trying to do that for my children. Anos would do that for other musicians I meet. And there's a vulnerability to that because you've got to let down all the social norms and things as well. So trying to be ourselves, right? And whether there's going to be stigma and ableism, which I've seen, and I did react to it first, and now I've I've got no control over that. That takes time. So obviously there's different colors to all of that and things, but I think the awareness first before you can even start even looking at the systems and the processes and the structures and stuff.
And navigating systems like that can take a real toll. What internal strengths, coping strategies, or external supports help you keep going during those more difficult periods?
So this is like a double-sided coin because there's the sort of reality side of, the terminology and things, but there's also my creative way of explaining it. But in regards to sort of resources and things, I call it, there's like a treatment triangle, and and it's different for everybody. I am on medication. I have got ADHD meds. Personally, don't see them as the permanent solution. I see them as like a stabilizer, like a crutch, and then I'm using them to build the life environment I can to wean off of that. So that's one part of the triangle, because I could try physical and I could try mental, the mental sort of resources. But having ADHD, it's so glitchy. It's one of those, it just, it needs that internal stabilizer, and that's what the ADHD meds. So then the mental side of it was, I looked into therapists and looked into counselors and things as well. But I particularly wanted a lived experience. That was just a personal preference, because it's almost like someone can look past whatever mask you've got. They know you're masking. I think that's a really important thing. I can almost look into your soul. But it's I found a needle in a haystack, and she's wonderful, and I also got a coach. So and then obviously there's physical. You can go into, I walk in nature, and nature when I'm in woods, all the roots and everything as well. It looks like a neurodivergent brain, but it
just feels like home.
Right. And everything is natural. Whereas you go into town or you go into a city and things, and it's all unnatural noises, which is why the senses sort of expand. So that's external. Internally, again, it's one of those where you can find all these resources. It's not a one size fits all. So for me, I started doing, during one of my recoveries, I went on TikTok and I started up guitar therapy. And guitar therapy wasn't, I don't take requests, but also what I don't do is people please for the algorithm, people please for the, for the people that were on there. I went on there when my nervous system needed it. And I also tuned my guitar to a way where I improvised, so I couldn't do any song requests. And interestingly, the response was, I had people from Brazil all around the world going, I had no idea I needed this. And that was a really lovely sort of, it didn't feel like an isolated thing. I was obviously doing it with people without having to go out. And I discovered that. And what I'm trying to say there is that there may be, people may make suggestions and things as well, but it's what feels at home to you that regulates your nervous system. So I suppose, again, it's awareness of, I want to get a dog this year. The reason is for my children and things, because it's regulation, unconditional love and other things as well. So it's trying to find, walking out in nature.
They keep you on schedule. Like,
right.
I got my dog because of, it keeps my ADHD and my health on schedule. Like, because of him, we start our day every day at the park. We get our sunlight, we get that refresh, and like, It's just normal. And he gets mad at me if my alarm goes on for my pill and I don't get up to take it. So like he makes me make sure I stay on track.
So he becomes your second alarm, basically.
Absolutely.
And that's, especially something with a dog where I know ADHD is, especially up to the age of 10, how many negative messages, I say up to 20,000, and so that means that we've eroded our self-trust, our self-care, our intuition. We don't trust ourselves anymore because everyone, but when we got something like a dog, he's just like, no, I don't care about any of that. I just see you as a person. And my guitar is called Luna. She's my best friend and therapist, right? And but that's, another musician might not call it that, but for me, it means I've got a relationship. I go and connect and communicate with it every day instead of practicing and these things. So even changing terminology, I don't go to work, all right? I do work, obviously, but using that terminology means it shifts my energy. So there's things that I've started to play around with, and even the term deficit, I get it in neurodivergent world and things as well, but I'm like, actually, where can I not have a deficit, and all what areas and things. So a little bit of experimentation, trial and error, and writing them down. Just find one that you find regulates yourself, even just sitting in front of the TV, if it just calms the brain down or whatever it is, and being aware of that. I think it kind of, again, it's alluding to, there is things you can gain, but there's things you can strip out. Because again, there's a concept, I think it's Michelangelo, he calls it the angel in the stone. And I learned about this concept. It's like, it's not about putting things more on. It's about like trying to strip yourself back to your core self. And interestingly, actually, after the fourth crisis I had last August, it was almost like the final one to go. It got so serious in regard, the event and things, that I then went, something seriously has to change. And so by doing that, what I did is I had to take all the weights, my life weights, off to be able to realize what is my bandwidth, where is the threshold that can keep me above. And again, it's like if you've got an internal, like a mixing desk, and if it starts to peak, you've got to, reduce the volume and things as well. Yes, that put more strain on other members of the family and things as well. But it's just like, no, this is survival. This is life and death and stuff. But it's not necessarily as a system. It's more of okay, strip everything down. Even I had to reduce the time of my children just for a short time to go, what is that threshold? And then, because we can also make the smallest of tasks a huge, huge priority, and we can catastrophize to, and all these things. So it's like going, no, what is the basic? What is my basic needs here? Because my basic threshold might be a lot lower than what I've been trying to run at with someone else's, like a neurotypicals. And it's these things that I had to realize first, because I can't build anything until I know exactly where everything is at the bottom. And especially if the foundations are cracked and broken, it's always just going to fall down. So I had to, again, kind of what you were talking about, regards to 12-hour days and things as well, right? Which I used to do. I used to stay up to 1 a.m. building things and stuff. For an ADHD, you can do 1 hour work, and that could be 4 hours equivalent to someone else, right? So if you're doing 12 hours, you're doing a whole week's worth of work. And that then is, okay, actually, I had someone talk to me and say, oh, I do a 2-hour block and then I take an hour off, and then I do a 2-hour block. But it doesn't matter if a day stretches to the all day. It's just, and also it's not fixed either. If you don't do something one day, it's fine. Like check in with yourself, or do something like I do something where I go an easy, a medium, and a hard task. I try to do the hard task first, then I go to medium and easy. But if I don't achieve it one day, it's fine. It's not, it's one of those things. It feels like I'm going to die tomorrow. It's that kind of gets that extreme.
I push those tasks for a week. I'm like, hey, this is my task for the week. This is my personal goals. And then like, if it's specific work daily goals, I'm like, okay, this is what you need. But I'm like, okay, it's okay.
One thing there, I mean, obviously, Paul, if you don't, I'll just explain this one thing to that in regards to a system here. So I'm building something called a neurodivergent, it's not all for neurodivergence. It's called a dashboard. And the idea is a second brain. So you can then it's like cognitive dissonance. And one of the tabs is called an awareness tracker. And basically you can have certain tasks of your day and it's got 31 days and you use a traffic light system, green, I've completed it, yellow, I haven't, and red. So you don't take any metrics. The idea for the first month is not to analyze, but it is just to plot in if it's been done on things. And at the end of the month, all you do is you take, oh, I've did all the green blocks. Right. That's a win. Oh, I got the yellow blocks. Okay. So you carry those over, you remove the reds, and you just try and pull those yellows up to the green for the second month. The idea of this is then it's kind of subtle self-awareness and system building, and also figuring out what you are doing right. And then the reds are not there to be criticism or to go, it's like internal stigma and stuff. The reds are to go, are they serving you? If they're not, get rid of them. Or Absolutely. Can you outsource them? And outsource them as well. And I think that's what we most of the time was when we got loads of reds, all we do is focus on the reds. So it's almost like trying to have, before going to social media, go to your dashboard I've got a big A1 whiteboard that I wrote. It's like a vision board and stuff. And I try to look at that. So it's almost like this is a mirror rather than what social media, we know this algorithms. And I delete all my apps and like social media apps when I have to go and drop some social media content. I have to install them all, then I have to drop it, then I have to delete them. It's ridiculous, but it's one of those where it's like, this is my only way at the moment. There'll Absolutely. Be other ways to do it, but that's, some people say that's discipline, but no, I know what it will do to me, especially each platform. If I've got to drop a piece of content, 10 minutes scrolling and I'm like, oh, right. So, and again, these things have come across where I might have been told to do these things and stuff. And at first I'm like, oh, no. But I think it's like an internal decision matrix. It seeps through and it's like taking pinches of salt. It's almost like I've started to do that with advice from people because we used to just agree to everybody's advice because we're masking. Now I just listen and I go, yeah, no, that doesn't serve me. And it's interesting when I do say no, what we were talking about earlier. So yeah, there's a multitude of things that I'm trying to also preach what I teach Absolutely. For when I give to someone else. Because if I go and give a tool to someone else, or if I teach guitar, or if I do these things, it's no point in me doing it if I'm not doing it myself. And that's I think one of my purpose. I want to come in with lived experience of all these things before I even give any advice, because it's just like it's just fake to me. So yeah,
if you want to be authentic, which kind of leads into the one thing we really appreciated hearing was how those experiences eventually shifted into purpose, and like everything we've heard from you start to build upon, like you talk about your pyramid or what's happening underneath and building, which is awesome. Was there a specific moment or maybe a gradual realization where you knew you wanted to use your experience to help others? Like, did you have that aha moment? Like, can you remember that spot, or it just kind of flowed all together?
It's interesting when, especially the way I found out about my ADHD and autism, it's not something like, have you thought you got ADHD? It's like, it's post-mental health crisis. It's like, I mean, it can't get any worse than that period, and obviously then being that vulnerable. So I think when it was like my brain was mush, but there was still like energy at the end of my fingertips because of the muscle memory. So when I picked up my guitar, there was still something coming through in regards to me communicating through music and things. And then I was kind of, starting to explore, okay, I'll just write some music. I had a rich vein of songwriting, and it started to feel like it came a concept neurodivergent album, which I built. And then I started a Neurodivergent Musician Podcast, because it wasn't for getting it out there really as an awareness asset. It was more of I need to talk to someone, but every time I keep talking, I keep getting cut up because I talk too long. So, right, let's just talk to myself. And that's what I was doing. And then I thought, oh, okay, I'll put it up on whatever podcast platform and things. And I started getting some emails and some messages. And it's interesting when that starts to happen, because people are not piping up. People talk about the music side of it, the metrics and how we get up in the business side, but they don't talk about the other side, which is so important, that foundation. So that started this kind of sort of peer-to-peer awareness and things. I went to a few groups and tried them out, but it kind of started to flick between, hang on a minute, am I building something here for me, or this is strangely turned into some kind of awareness thing. So it's almost like something falls on your lap. I think it's that moment. It's a penny drop where you go, oh, hang on a minute. Is no one else talking about this? Or obviously, you start to see on social media everywhere and things. And I was like, I don't really want to talk about, ADHD specifically. I've seen loads of other people talk about it, but what if I just talk about it as a musician, that sort of, and then in a niche, because you could talk about it in gaming, or you could talk about this. And then, before you know it, it's just like when you start to hear musicians say, oh, aren't all musicians neurodivergent? I'm like, but why? We all know this, like the elephant in the room. We all know this, but no one's talking about it. So that's where I realized it was clear water in regards to there's something here. And I believe I survived what I went through, not only for my children, but there's a purpose kind of North Star feeling of, I've tried other businesses and stuff. And it's like, you always feel like you're forcing it. This just feels like I'm gravitating towards where this is going.
The coolest thing with being neurodivergent is that you feel and connect with what's actually working. And like, once you're really attuned to yourself, like you do that work and you figure out what works best for you, it's a superpower. And it's such a cool power to have once you can kind of go on to it. I just love it.
It's amazing. And, there's a few things like that came up, and, it's very sad, but I don't know if you remember the Liam Payne story, from One Direction and things as well. And, I didn't follow One Direction, but it was interesting, his interviews and stuff before he passed and things, but he had a late diagnosis of ADHD, and he used to be like in hotel rooms, and, he was talking about this with alcohol and stuff as well. And when he passed, what I did is I went back and watched his old interviews. I was like, oh my word, there's all the signs. And I was like, before that, people would jump on his like front behavior. They would only analyze the behavior, but they didn't have the awareness to look behind. So when I saw that, and then Robbie Williams came out and talked about his neurodivergence, and then Simon Cowell was almost like, something's got to change in the industry, but everybody's still talking about mental health, which is important. But it was like,
absolutely.
Okay, and artists are coming out saying, oh, I've got ADHD, but it's like, but where's the daily grind of the advocacy and things? And that's where I went.
To our next kind of question for you, with being visible in both as a musician and now as advocacy and a neurodiversity, it comes with its own challenges. Like, how do you balance your advocacy time and the visibility between protecting your own well-being? Because like I know personally for myself, when I do go online, or like I have to only do a little bit of time, like you said, you delete your apps, but like just balancing yourself, and like, how do you keep that going?
Oh, do you know what? This is so present. This only happened this week. I deleted all my business stuff off my phone. Right. And it sounds like, oh, that sounds quite obvious, but actually it's because it's so accessible. The interesting thing about when you see a comment or you see an email that you've got to respond to, how I respond when I'm on my phone, I'm in the middle of something else, and how I respond when I've got to go to my computer, which is in a garden office. What I do then is I walk up, I prepare my nervous system to then sit down and do the emails. Obviously, I have ChatGPT as like a sidekick. I don't just bring it across and then send whatever it is. It's like help me adjust this, because it takes the bandwidth away as well. And I've started taking screenshots of comments before even reading them. Can you just, it's like a filter. ChatGPT almost gives that kind of padding and things. Not all the time, but talking about those noise. Now, we're in the shallow end at the moment. We haven't even gone into the deep end of what the industry is going to do and stuff, and probably all the kinds of negativity. And I've got a support worker, and she's, Sarah. And I said to her, I'm like, the storm is coming, like a tidal wave's coming, but also a storm. But I think what I've gone through has almost prepared me for nothing. My perspective is nothing can be worse. And I am very aware that if I'm going out as the spokesman, obviously going to speak in these things, I'm going to get curveball questions. I'm going to get all sorts of stuff. And I'm going to have to be honest and go, I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a coach and stuff. And I don't pretend to be. I'm a peer. And then I'm a mentor, but I do, it's all like, almost like a player coach or a player mentor. So I think I'm learning as we go through this, as you can imagine, once you get into this, we are also neurodivergent. There's also a feeling of, I've got to be neurodivergent, but I've got to pretend to be like I've got everything together. And actually, I've got to preach what I teach in regards to vulnerability. I mess up my lines. I speak too much. And if I start to, use red tape and straighten it out.
It's calming to feel vulnerable now, that's how I feel. But like, it's a different journey than you for sure. But like, I'm like, oh, hey, my words are gone today. By the way, they're like, okay, Tegan, thanks.
Yeah. And do you know what's lovely is that it's relatable. There seems to be now, you can tell, like when you're speaking to someone else, it's like, oh my goodness. And then you get into, I call it two ADHDers get together. It's like Superman and the Flash talking.
And when you both go off.
Right. And it's beautiful synergy and stuff. But then you're like, oh, 3 hours. I didn't know that went. So that's what I'm looking forward to. That's why I want to build it first instead of going out and just talking, because it feels like I'm just me talking. Whereas, there's people in my community. I said, what role would you like to be? And he was like, oh, I'd like to be a global ambassador. Go and do that then. And I'm like, and so, yeah. And so it's not I also don't want this to be this is Neurodivergent Musicians. We are a closed thing. You have to go through multiple departments to get to our point and stuff. I'm like, no, I want you to bolt on and, without taking advantage and, because I've got that sort of feeling. There's justice and sensitivity, obviously, within all of this as well, where, I want to support and stuff as well and not feel like I'm going in anarchy and rebellious. It's that kind of quiet kind of building where they're going, something's going on over there. And it's got so big now that they can't ignore it. In a good way, hopefully. So, yeah, we'll see. But, yeah.
That purpose really shows up in what you're doing now. Can you tell us about the work you're currently involved in and what impact you hope it has for the neurodivergent community?
Hey, thanks so much for listening to this half of the episode. If you want to listen to the second half, head on over to the Neurodiversity Voices podcast website. There is a link in the description and you can listen to it there. Make sure to follow this podcast and to follow the Neurodiversity Voices podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you at the next episode. Cheers. Take care. Bye.